Bienvenidos a IFAB Online.
Welcome to IFAB Online.
Welcome to IFAB Online.
Hello and welcome to our session, Fundraising for North America from Latin America. My name is Nick Opinski and I'm a Senior Development Officer at American Jewish World Service, which is an international human rights nonprofit and grant maker. I'm very pleased to be joined here by Angelica Cariaga from CASE, who's based in Mexico City, and Ellen Sullivan, who works at Phillips Andover Academy. Angelica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Yes, well, as Nick mentioned, I am the Angelica Cariaga, Executive Director for CASE Latin America. My office is based in Mexico City. I've been with CASE for 4 years now. Previous to that, I primarily work in higher education in the area of internationalization. So I'm pretty new in the area of fundraising in education institutions. However, I have been part of a board in an NGO here in Mexico that works with kids in the street, children in the streets. And so in that role, as a volunteer, I've been doing some fundraising. In terms of my professional work, I worked for the British Council for 17 years here in Mexico City. And at the end, I became the regional director for Latin America, which meant in that time that I was responsible for coordinating different projects in education with the different countries where the British Council had offices in Latin America. So that really provided me a lot of opportunity to get to work with different countries across the region. After that, then I was invited to work in 2 public main universities here in Mexico City to develop their international program and pushing more both student and academic mobility and trying really to expand the collaboration outside Latin America, but also with Europe and Asia. So that really provided me, again, more opportunity to get to know different cultures, different countries, and working for this more understanding and raising awareness of culture. So far, now I've been here with CASE, enjoying my work, helping educational institutions to start working in the area of fundraising and development of their advancement offices. So that's me. Thank you, Nick.
Wonderful. Ellen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Nick. As Nick said, everyone, I'm Director of International Advancement at Phillips Academy, Andover. This is an independent boarding school in Andover, Massachusetts that's quite old by US standards, established in 1778. And I've been at Andover for 3 years as the Director of International Advancement. Prior to coming to Andover, all of my career was actually in higher education. So I spent 21 years at Harvard University, and then the last 5 years at Boston College, which is my own alma mater. My very first job in fundraising was in 1998 at Harvard when I made the transition from working in the admissions office to working in the development office. And this was, in fact, a very well-trod path by many people before me at Harvard. Many of you know that the skills and experiences that you have in admission are very similar and complementary to those that you need to be successful in development. You need a strong familiarity with the institution. You need to be able to exhibit clarity in writing and oral expression. And you need to be really comfortable and effective working with volunteers. And all of these things translated very effectively to a fundraising career. My first fundraising role at Harvard was actually with the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies, which was a new entity created at Harvard in the mid-90s. And I myself had lived in Latin America for a couple of years as a volunteer teacher after college. So I was quite drawn to this dynamic, vibrant kind of startup research center. And I spent about 6 years working very closely with the Latin America Center. Then moved to a role in corporate and foundation relations. And my final role at Harvard was Director of International Advancement, which I then carried forward to Boston College. And I'm in a very similar role today at Andover.
Wonderful. It's so great to be with both of you today. And just some background about myself. I work at American Jewish World Service, as I mentioned. previously, I was working at Foundation Center, which is a global resource on philanthropy that has now become Candid after the merger with GuideStar. And I also lived in El Salvador for about 6 months, which is really my main experience in Latin America, where I started an arts project which brings children from underprivileged areas and areas of high violence to their national art museum. So that's really where my experience in fundraising on the reverse side of the coin for Latin America comes in. And it's just wonderful to be here with you both. So why don't we jump in and talk about fundraising for North America from Latin America. So my first question is not actually a question for you both, it's a scenario, just really to get us thinking about the common themes between both regions. So I'd like you both to imagine that you've recently taken a position as a major gift officer at a university. Your development director has mentioned that the team has been really interested in exploring alumni relationships in Latin America and has suggested that naturally you'd be the perfect fit for that task. The major gift officer, yourself, though highly knowledgeable about fundraising, is very new to fundraising in Latin America. What advice would you give yourself, or we can also imagine the other person, to be best set up for success?
So thanks for the question, Nick. I think the single most important first step would be to educate yourself well on the region. You want to develop a basic understanding of the economies, the politics, the social context, the current events and affairs of the region, and also of the particular countries. Because in fact, Latin America is, many countries very different from one another, some with tense relationships, some with easier relationships. But it's really important that you educate yourself about the region. And so when I was getting into this work about 20 years ago, my go-tos were The Economist, and I try to read it every week, at least the parts that pertain to Latin America. I find it to be an incredibly helpful assist in that regard. And also the Financial Times is really good. You can set alerts on your email so that you get Latin America related stories. Certainly the Forbes Latin America list is really helpful to be familiar with, so you get an understanding of who are some of the leading industrial families historically in each of the countries. And then a fourth thing I would do is familiarize myself with the standing of Latin American universities. There are just a couple Latin American universities on the top 200 list of global universities. And as you can well imagine, Latin Americans are very proud of their universities when they reach to this level. So just becoming familiar with those things through those resources, I think will be a really good start.
Yeah, and I agree completely with Ellen. And I will say, well, we are 20 countries in Latin America within 6 different time zones. So that really provides you a little bit of that kind of the size of what you're looking at. And I think that is very important even to decide which countries you are going to be working. You cannot really be that willing to really reach a lot when it is a really large continent. I think that in Latin America, it's also very important to, I will suggest to get to know who the Latin American students are in your institution. You need to get closer to our culture. You need to find out who we are, what we like. And I think that you have in your campuses a lot of Latin American background students, even you have Hispanic universities that they have a lot of those Mexican or Central Americans or South Americans that are coming to institutions. And I think it's very important to get to know them, to talk to them, to find out more about what they think. They also, a lot of them will have money because they are studying there. Not everybody goes with a scholarship. And they will be a very good source of information about different stakeholders, families, who is really managing in different areas in the businesses, so that you can add to those information, formal information that Ellen was talking, but now directly from the student body or even faculty, because you also find faculty that are coming from this part of the region. And that will allow you to get to know. And then obviously your alumni, if you are already starting working and you have some good alumni that you started to be in touch with, it's important to have that relationship. I have a lot of suggestions. Even I would suggest it's not a must, but language could be one of them, so that you can be able to open your knowledge in reading more information in Spanish or Portuguese, depending what country you are interested in, because that opens you that opportunity to learn more about our culture, our enrichedness.
I would like to amplify this very important point that Angelica made about getting to know your students. So when I was at Boston College, there was a Latin American business club, a very earnest group of very sincere, dedicated students who wanted to see broader understandings of Latin America at Boston College and who were looking for faculty mentors. So they sought out the Latin Americanist faculty, the economists, the management professors, the historians who had something to add. And I was very delighted when they asked me to be their club advisor. At first I thought, well, what do I know about Latin American business? And then I realized I could actually tell them who the alumni are from our college who've gone on to successful careers in business, and who chances are, when they were students 20 or 30 years ago, were pretty lonely as Latin Americans and didn't have a Latin American business club. And as you can imagine, when I reached out to these well-placed Latin American graduates on behalf of the students, they always accepted the invitation to come and speak to the Latin American Business Club. And they were blown away that there were more than 100 kids well-dressed in suits and ties on a Saturday morning to receive them. And so for me, as the fundraiser, that was a wonderful way, substantively, meaningfully, to connect with the alumni. And it was a great service to the students, 100 of whom will graduate thinking there was a person who helped us. And there was a person who showed that we are part of a larger community. And we remember that alum came and shared with us, and we should do the same. So you're really helping to develop a virtuous cycle when you start working with the students.
And you touched something that is important. I think that in Latin America, we are proud of our countries, even though we recognize we have similarities, each country is different. But the formality, when you mentioned that they were wearing suits and ties, I think that's something very important when you're going to start working in Latin America. Formality, even if you're invited to a meal, that is a very good way of starting developing relationships, is formal. We like formality, so I advise that. And another thing I want to emphasize is do not have preconceptions. I'm Mexican, and I know that there are a lot of preconceptions. I studied in the US, and to me it was a big surprise meeting people and people not understanding about Mexico, and they had these preconceived conceptions, and I really had to be fighting and telling them that no, we are a developed country. We have urban, huge cities. We have incredible buildings. We have great urban cities that a lot of people in the US don't even imagine that we have that kind, because we are contrasting countries in terms of wealth and poverty. But you find amazing cities, and development, and we have science research. We have excellent universities, and as Ellen said, we are proud of our universities. And something that we don't like is to feel patronized by having people coming from the US. And so we are looking for this kind of recognition of who we are and what we have been able to achieve in spite of all the difficulties that we have in our countries. So to have that open-minded from the cultural perspective, I would really recommend that for you before you even start contacting people in the region as part of your homework.
Thank you so much, both. I'd like to just take it right off from there, and from your point, Angelica, which I totally agree. There is this often, sometimes questionably patronizing tendency to group Latin America together as one region, as being all monolithic. And as we all know, it is an incredibly diverse region with truly pronounced differences in culture across the countries. And this is even especially true when it comes to the connections with North America. If you just think geographically, Argentina is a lot farther away than Mexico. So there's some very clear differences between within the region and with the relationship with North America. I'd love it if you both could speak a bit more about some of those pronounced differences that you might have noticed in your experience, especially when it comes to fundraising across the region.
Well, one thing what I would offer, I defer to Angelica completely on the cultural distinctions, but from a fundraiser perspective, in a funny way, you can actually play off these distinctions in ways that will help to serve the interests of your institution. So when I was at the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies at Harvard, we had a visiting scholar program, and our ambition was to raise funds to ensure that we could have a visiting. So we wanted to have funds to invite a visiting scholar from Colombia, and a visiting scholar from Mexico, and a visiting scholar from Brazil, and from Argentina, and from Chile. And what we found was that if we could get one, let's say we had a visiting scholar from Mexico, then we could go to the Brazilians and say, what a shame for a visiting scholar from Brazil. And they would say, but you have one from Mexico. And we said, yes, isn't that wonderful? Because someone has funded that. It's a pity that we haven't yet identified someone who could fund a Brazilian scholar. Well, guess what happened? There was a Brazilian scholar, there was a Colombian scholar, then the Central American representatives, the alumni from Central America, many small and not very wealthy countries, Honduras, Costa Rica, Guatemala, they got together and said, what if we pooled our resources so that there could always be a Central American visiting scholar from one of our 7 countries? So today at Harvard, there's an endowed position for a Central American visiting scholar and many others. So in some ways, the whole idea of distinct nationalist identities can actually serve your purpose as a fundraiser if you manage it well. So I'd lob back to Angelica.
Yes, I agree with Helen about what she said. I think that even though we are happy to say that we are Latin American countries, when we want to put ourselves worldwide, at the end, each country wants to, we're very regionalized in that term. We really want even to make the difference between Mexico and Colombia and Chile. And even we all speak Spanish. There are a lot of words that are not even the same. And so we make a lot of jokes among ourselves and say, no, that's not the way we say it in our own country. And we want to make those differences completely in our food. Food is very different from each country. Our traditions are very different. And so it's amazing, this diversity that Ellen was talking about that brings a lot of opportunities. But in terms of fundraising, well, in that case, I think that helped because, well, everybody wants to have a seat and everybody wants to be able to be seen. We are always fighting to be able to be seen worldwide because sometimes we feel that Latin America is not in the map of a lot of European countries or in the US or even in some Asian countries. So we are always continually trying to get that visibility. And so that's why countries would like to be working. But then in terms of having more specific, longer term projects, Ellen, I think that then you cannot work with all the countries. I think you need to do a lot of research in identifying where you will have best opportunities in terms of your contacts, the possibilities of giving, and all that developing of the relationship, because we know that it takes time for fundraising and it's about building relationships. But in the region, building relationships, and even though we are very open and hospitable, and if you travel, you will see that almost all the Latin American countries, we welcome foreigners and we are very pleased to receive them. And we are very proud to have them over there to see what we have to offer. But when it comes to the nation, then because of corruption, because of not being normally trusting our governments or trusting things related to money, people are more reluctant. And then they close in and it's harder to develop. You really, really need to work harder in the developing of the relationship to be able to get to that point. It's not impossible because I know a lot of Mexicans and Colombians and Brazilians are giving to US institutions because we know that, but it has taken time to deliver that trust, and primarily in terms of transparency because of what we live in our countries.
And I would just add on that, in my experience in working across Latin America and North America, that I think there's a tendency, especially among among certain North Americans to assume that there is this inherent understanding of North American cultural values and of institutions, but my experience has been that's really not the case depending on the country. Having lived in El Salvador, there is very much more of a connection with the U.S., and I believe there is with the U.S. and Canada, and I believe there is in Mexico. But having just traveled a bit to Chile, it's very much more distant and very much more independent. And I think as a North American institution that might be considering embarking on fundraising from Latin America, it's just so important to not assume that there's this understanding of how you operate, of your mission that's just inherently there. There is this kind of necessity to build that relationship and understanding, which leads me to my next question, which was also talked about, which is about relationships. Relationships, of course, they matter across the board, but especially when it comes to fundraising. And as you both mentioned, in Latin America, for a variety of factors, understanding them is even more crucial. I'd love if you both could speak about how you would approach understanding the key relationships among your institution's current and potential donors in the region.
I would like to start saying, for example, family is very important, and I can say that's for almost all the countries. We are very close to our families, and then talking about businesses, a lot of businesses really go from generation to generation. And I think mapping that kind of family tree is very important. I was talking to a Colombian colleague, and she was telling me, well, here in Colombia, you need really to, and we do that a lot, even fundraising locally, you need to know who the patriarca is. That means who is the head of the family. And then who is the favorite? Because, well, he has different children. Who is the favorite of that patriarcha, of that head? And normally, traditionally, has been the first son. You know, if the first one was a daughter, probably will be the first son. It's changing, but traditionally, that's what is happening. And then even she said, we have to go to the third generation. And we are finding out that in the third generation, normally the favorite is a daughter, is a granddaughter. And so that changes the perspective of when you are really wanting to understand the whole family structure in terms of decision-making, in terms of even donations. Probably the granddaughter can change completely the decision of the patriarcha when she's involved. So that is one part that I really say that in our regions, a lot of businesses are like that, and you need really to do that homework that Ellen was talking about, but then going into that family tree to try then to find the connectivities and the relationships that they have with other people to be sure where you are talking. Once you really have someone to introduce you, if you don't have that direct contact, you need to find your way to be able to be connected. Then I will say that in Latin America, businesses are done a lot doing meals. We love our food, and then we normally try to invite people to a lunch, normally. If that person is a little bit busier, we then invite them to breakfast. And you will find out, and that's really shocking for a lot of Americans. My husband is American, and he says, I don't understand these long meals, because we have long meals. And then in terms of businesses and fundraising, conversation should be informal, colloquial during the meal. You never talk about fundraising or business during the meal. That's, a lot of people take that a little bit rude. So, and that is when you already had developed that relationship. And normally businesses in our region are doing dessert, if it's a lunch, or another cup of coffee that you will say, why don't I have another cup of coffee if it's breakfast? To try really to then have that conversation. Then you have to have this open-minded that it takes time, and that and inviting to that meal, if you're organizing a meal, then you probably need to invite the 3 generations that I was talking about, so that all of them will be informed, and then to see how the dynamics go in terms of the influence of making a decision. So I'm sharing this because that we have lived, and I can share that is very similar in other countries in the region. I don't know, Eileen, your experience on that.
Yes, Angelica, you're reminding me of a particular scenario. So I worked at Boston College for 5 years. It's a Jesuit university established in 1854, very proud of its Jesuit heritage and its connection to the Jesuit communities across Latin America. And there was a time when we had a family with several children at our school and what we perceived to be great capacity to make a difference at our school. And this family was based in Chile, and they also had strong ties to the Jesuit community in Chile. So we were invited to their home for dinner, we being the president of the university, the head of fundraising, and me, the person behind the scenes who was orchestrating everything. And as Americans often do, we thought this dinner would be an opportunity to discuss our big agenda and our ambitions, because that's how we conduct business. When we got to the family home, we realized that all the great aunts and great uncles and cousins and grandchildren and the head of the Jesuit order in Chile had all been invited to this dinner. There were 17 or 18 people at the dinner. This was clearly not going to be the time to talk about the agenda of Boston College. And there was some fidgeting among the leaders of Boston College upon realizing that their ambitions had been stifled, at least at this particular moment. And as Angelica said, relationships and family matters. And it was a point of pride for this family that they had the opportunity to invite their relatives, young and old, and the head of the Jesuits in Chile to meet the president of Boston College. This was an important, delightful, memorable moment for this family. And for us to react in any way other than to go with it and express our profound appreciation and imagine that tomorrow or another time, we will be able to have the 20 minutes that we really need in private to advance our discussion. Had we done anything other than that, we wouldn't have been successful. So I think Americans have to recognize, I am not controlling this environment. This is not an environment that's familiar to me, but I need to understand from the donor's perspective or the prospect's perspective that this is the way it's going to go. And so if I'm smart, as I'm setting the schedule, I might set a coffee meeting for 10:30 the following morning at the office upon our way out of town. And it's in that coffee meeting that we extend our profound appreciation for the most memorable and wonderful event of the night before. And we discuss in a bulleted terms our ambitions and take it from there.
Yeah, and you got it right. As I mentioned, normally we say don't do it unless you really see that's the opportunity. And then another one is, and if they're invited to your home, that is a plus. We love to share that, but sometimes they like restaurants, and then you have to choose the right restaurant because those families really are very strict in that kind of formality restaurant that they like. And normally will have to be something that is their own type of food. And another thing is, if you are in that situation, right? I know that right now we are not traveling, but you need to try our food. As we are very proud of our food, then sometimes when a guest doesn't even want to try the food, then we get a little bit upset about it. So you need to have this open-minded, but also open stomach, I would say, in terms of at least trying and seeing, and if you like it, then people get really very excited about it. This is something that we feel this is a way of entering and getting to know our culture. It's also through the stomach in that sense. And we are very good into, feeling proud. And you go to Chile, you go to different countries, and they have their own particular dishes that they really want foreigners to come and try and to say what they thought about it. So if you are not very good at that, then I will suggest them to choose another one, because that, as meals are important, that will be linked to it too.
Nick, if I may, I thought of another important comment when Angelica mentioned the possibility of the granddaughter.
Yeah.
That reminds me that really you need to be aware of who are our current students from the region. You need to get to know these students. So when I was at Boston College, I got to know a kid from one of the families in Latin America, and I also got to know his parents. And so I sent an email to his mom saying, I'm coming, and there are a few families, and I wondered if you would be willing to host a dinner for Boston College with your family and these other families. And she wrote back and said, sure, we'll do it at my brother-in-law's restaurant. is also a Boston College graduate. And we didn't have any knowledge that this child was related to anybody from Boston College. So very quickly, I look up the brother-in-law and I discover that he went to Boston College 20 years before. And that is in fact why the child, the nephew, has chosen Boston College. And not only that, but I discover the uncle's wife, her brother, his wife, 4 people with Boston College MBAs from 20 years ago, from the same country and the same family. And the records were not connected. And I think many people will be nodding in acknowledgement that that is often the case. So understanding who your current students are will often lead you to very proud but disconnected alumni also in their family. So it's worth doing.
Yeah. And another kind of cultural component is, I think that a lot of people are aware of this, but I just want to emphasize, if you have that opportunity of having that personal contact, at the beginning, particularly people from the US or do not know how to handle. We normally kiss each other's one kiss cheek, no? And that is when you already know someone. But if it's a formal meeting, we normally shake hands, both women and men, and you go and you introduce and you shake hands, and that's very common. And between men, even the shaking is a little bit stronger, and that's the way they do it. But then if you have a second chance or a third chance, and depending on how the relationship goes, then normally you will see women to women will kiss each other, and even women to men, and that is considered something like you have broken the ice. And even if you speak the language, then you move from using usted, which is the formal way of speaking, into the tú, speaking formal. If you are doing it in Spanish, you don't have that issue in English because you use the you. But if you are dealing, and I've been talking to Ellen about it because we have been working together now. If you deal with an alumni that is 60 years old, that he went to your institution, 40 years ago, he probably, obviously he learned English and he spoke English because he studied in your institution, but it has been so long, especially that person never really did international business and stay in its own home country, they probably have forgotten the language. And so they really would appreciate someone that will speak a little bit of Spanish or Portuguese, depending on the country. Whereas with the younger generations, obviously you will not have that problem. You will find them with very fluent English, and so you don't have that problem. But I just want to share this when you are building those personal relationships with the different families and alumni or contacts in the different countries.
Thank you. All the talk about food made me excited for lunch coming up. So something else to look forward to. I also really enjoyed hearing, in a way, what not to do in certain situations. I think that as North American fundraisers, there's often this pressure that meeting automatically equals ask. And I just think that's a really great story of using one's emotional intelligence and also cultural intelligence to realize that that's not appropriate. I was wondering if you both had anything else that, any other sort of norms that sometimes in North American fundraising sort of hold true, such as meeting equals ask, that wouldn't hold true in Latin America. I think we've covered a lot of them, but if there's anything you'd like to reiterate, I think it would be really interesting.
Well, in those meetings, it's just to have that, Americans like to plan, meeting is from 3 to 4 or from 4 to 5, even if you're invited to a meal. And normally they say, well, that meal will take 1 hour. And so they make another appointment afterwards because they feel that they need really to take better use of their time. And they don't understand that in our case, we have a starting time for the meeting, but normally we don't have an ending time, particularly if it's a meal. And that is something that they need to have in mind. Don't make other appointments afterward, because then you will feel really in a critical situation with whoever is the next appointment. So better not to do that many plans and be open to avoid then having difficulties with the next meeting, particularly because if this one is very important, then you need to allow time. Even though we have to be conscious that these people are very important people, but if they are inviting you to a meal, they give that time for the meal, especially with their if they are inviting the family, that is very common.
That's great advice. I so many of my times in Latin America have just sort of evolved from, you know, a lunch to a dinner to, and part of that spontaneity as a fundraiser is what really allows you to build that relationship. So totally agree. Ellen, do you have anything to add?
You know, I do have another thought. I keep going back to students, and this perhaps doesn't directly address your question, but it's in the context of Latin Americans not wanting to be an afterthought for the institution, wanting to see a sustained commitment. So the fact that a fundraiser is going to Argentina, that's good. But one would also hope that the alumni relations community of your institution is reaching out to the community in Argentina so they don't feel like, oh, they're only interested in that one guy who we all know about who lives in a house on the hill. Yeah. And one way I think that institutions can protect against that, and to me it's quite obvious, but I've seen that it doesn't happen that often, is to think about the structures that you already have in place. So if you have a senior gift program, who's on the senior gift committee? Is there a Latin American kid on the senior gift committee? If not, you're probably not breaking through to that group of students from Latin America who are probably quite cohesive because they hang together and they speak Spanish together and they have cultural familiarity. And if you don't reach out and have one or two kids from that community on the senior gift committee, you're going to find that community is not going to feel particularly engaged in senior gift. And then track it out 5 years. Does the 5th reunion committee have someone from the Latin American community, and the 10th and the 20th? And you can see that structurally, if you're not including them in senior gift, you are essentially creating a context of having a group of strangers at the 5th reunion and the 10th reunion and further estranged at the 20th. And there's no reason for you to do that. You can break that cycle today by deliberately ensuring, and this is not just true for Latin America, of course. You know, I talk to Korean alumni who feel like they're not involved and connected in things. And yet you have Korean kids who are running every community organization on campus. So really thinking, if you're serious about the commitment, really thinking about how you break that cycle of creating strangers and instead creating fond, affectionate, and generous alumni.
And you would not regret it. As a student, obviously when I started in the US, there were not that many Mexicans. So I was like the only Mexican student. And so the Latin American students got together because that was the way that we felt that we were connected. And we were a lot of fun. I have to say the international office said that we were the funniest kind of group to be with because we always were organizing party. We all had music to share. We always were delighted to, I will cook something so everybody would try one of my dishes, even though sometimes it was very hard to get the ingredients. Because in a way, our way of doing things was reflected even in the student body that we were. We were all doing postgraduate courses, but we were very serious, very dedicated, but at the same time, we loved to organize parties and invite people to be able to share with them what we had. And that's something that makes us proud, but at the same time is fun. And so I highly recommend it because then you will add a little bit of spicy into your student, alumni communities if you have more students, Latin Americans, because they will offer. I know because even the UK universities, when I worked in the British Council, they were saying to me that they were the students that they really enjoy a lot in terms of that possibility of having fun on top of everything.
Thank you. I'd like to move to, of course, the most current event, which is COVID. Latin America has, as we all know, been among one of the hardest hit regions in terms of COVID. And for North American Fundraiser, I'm really curious about what advice do you have for developing and growing relationships in the region for institutions in North America when there's such a need for humanitarian relief for these donors in their own countries?
So I think you have to recognize on a human level that COVID has hit Latin America very, very hard. In Mexico, in Brazil, in Argentina, people are really suffering. And what that means is people with means and who travel in circles with government authorities feel a particular responsibility and obligation to step in and help to address the urgent humanitarian crisis in their countries. So recognizing that this is probably not the time to be asking, but it is absolutely the time to be offering, to be extending a hand, to be putting on online programs that might be of value and interest to build community and connection. So I was talking to a colleague at MIT, and she was telling me at the Sloan School, they've been doing a virtual series on Latin America for their global constituency. And while normally they would expect maybe 100 people to sign on, they've had as many as 1,200 people, graduates, friends, and family, sign on to programming virtually that is pertinent and interesting. Maybe it's an intellectual lifeline, maybe it's a distraction, but it's some kind of offering from your institution. And I feel that often institutions think only about what resources are there for us and not what is our obligation as an institution with a global community that we should be nurturing and appreciating and raising up. And this is the time to do all of those things.
I agree completely with what Ellen has said, and I have seen that. Recently, we had a survey done in Latin America with CASE about how COVID has impacted fundraising and alumni relations, and institutions have been really amazing in the region where they are saying that for the first time they were able to reach out to alumni that they had never reached out before, particularly living abroad, having their alumni that live abroad offering what do you need, and going back to their alma mater for the first time saying, is there something I can do for you? And they were just thrilled. They never imagined that was the kind of reaction. And I have seen a lot of webinars and online delivering, and as Ellen has been saying, in a collaboration process. It's not only is that the US institution is coming to teach us. Normally what they're doing is they're putting a Colombian, a Chilean, and then the US and more into this interactivity of sharing and what can we do to help. And not only this patronizing scope. I think that word to me is collaboration, and to offer that collaboration, because we are trying to do it. We have institutions that are trying to sort out, but yes, we need some help. But sometimes we don't like this patronizing. We really like to be seen that we can work it out together. And yes, we can learn from you, but then you can also learn from me. And I have seen institutions doing fundraising, building hospitals for COVID, really doing fundraising even to equip the whole hospitals in 3 months. But people don't share a lot this information, and this is like, wow, you heard about China doing that, but we didn't hear that a Mexican higher education institution in Mexicali did it. And that means that there is a capability when there is a need. And even though we are new in fundraising in general in Latin America, our institutions are just starting to develop their teams of advancement. When we have disasters, that we had different types in the region, people tend really to look and help, and this is when the generosity comes along. And if you can link those main issues, and as I mentioned before, we are contrasting countries. So we have this wealth, but we have this huge poverty. So we have a lot of issues related to health, to education, to water, to natural disasters, a lot of areas, key areas that US institutions have been working and doing research and doing big projects that could be very useful. And that will be a way of getting to your alumni or to important people in our countries, that if they see the benefits for their own countries, I'm sure that they will be delighted. I know that right now the economy is hitting us very badly. And as Ellen said, probably this is not right now the time to do the fundraising, but it is the right time to develop the relationships, to get that trust, to get to see that not patronization, but that willingness to help collaboratively. And then with that, I'm sure that once the time comes, they will be willing to offer. I have to say, I found out that a lot of Mexicans that are alumni students from different US institutions, they give donations to the US institutions. And when when I have met some of them and I ask them, why you don't give to your alma mater here in Mexico? They say, well, because they have never asked. So that means that the possibility is there. We haven't done our homework here locally with our own students, but if you develop that, there's that potential. And so it's in a way encouraging you to do it, but right now, just with this kind of limitation because of COVID and the economic crisis that we are living around the world, but in the region more.
I think the question actually brings us back to the very first question, which is, what advice would you have for someone? Part of the advice, I think, COVID or not, is to think about your institutional assets that could be of value in Latin America. So for example, do you have specialized expertise on early childhood education that could be of great interest to the country of Chile, which for the last 15 or 20 years has made very substantial investments in early childhood education. They've done that in collaboration with Harvard, because Harvard has a very well-credentialed Center for Early Childhood Development. At Boston College, there was another university in Chile we were working with from the nursing school. And actually, to Angelica's point about North Americans having opportunities for learning in these collaborations, our own Boston College students learned an awful lot about community healthcare and rural healthcare. Mm-hmm. The sort of barefoot doctor model applied to the 21st century. They learned a lot about that from their work in collaboration with Chilean students and faculty members. Another example that I remember from my days at Harvard was around the high incidence of asthma in certain Latin American urban centers because of the way highways were constructed. So what if there were some expertise at the North American University that could help to reimagine highway and urban road infrastructure in a way that wouldn't lead to high concentrations of disease? And that project got underway because it was of great value and interest to the folks on the ground in that country. So I think, as a first step, thinking about the institutional assets, and not everything that's an asset at your institution is going to translate effectively. But from what you've read and learned in The Economist and in the Wall Street Journal and all your other research, what are the 2 or 3 assets that you think your institution could actually deliver and add value on in the countries of Latin America?
Yeah, and another kind of advantage that I see is that we don't trust our governments because of the corruption that we have. And even working in an NGO here in Mexico, it has taken out a lot of time to really ensure people that we are transparent and we have done it because this is an NGO has been around for 25 years. And so people finally trust in giving donation to us because they know that we deliver and we are transparent. But in general, there is this mistrust kind of environment. But if it's a US institution and we know that how the regulations you have that plus, it's just sharing that knowledge to them, that saying this is the way you do it and the transparency that you're used to having, that will open that possibility, whereas probably within their own institution, it's taking us longer, I have to say, because I've been working in that area, because we really need to work very hard within our institutions to become more transparent, more really showing and being able to be accountable for what we are receiving. That is something that US has already very well set up, very well, transparent and done, and could be useful.
I would add from just my experience as a frontline fundraiser and being around fundraisers, that this time also, sort of going on from your points, that this is a time also to check in and just to say, how are you? How are you doing? This is a time when globally we're all kind of united in the same struggle and the same
solidarity.
Absolutely, in the same situation, and it represents a time to also connect on a human level without having to get on an airplane, because that's not a possibility. And I think so much of what COVID has done is that it has opened up and sort of push through these barriers that were otherwise closed for us to connect across borders. And then the other thing I would say is, especially when with regards to educational institutions, there's so many things going on in these institutions that I have no doubt that whether it's Boston College, Harvard, or even a small liberal arts college, there's something that is relevant to the global situation that we're facing today. So whether it's in the science field, whether it's thinking about the more social science field, there's certainly always something. If I just think of an example of in a university that I'm in touch with, hearing about how they're working on a COVID vaccine reminds me in my head of why I care about that institution and why it's relevant. So I think that applies for alumni and donors in Latin America, but across the board.
And to know that, yes, we use Zoom and that we are all working online, and talking to my colleagues in institutions saying that even they had the opportunity to be able to meet more with the presidents or with high level business seniority staff, because as they are not traveling and they're at home, they have more time. So if you, for example, already have developed a relationship before COVID, and I would just recommend not to give up and to continue the relationship via Zoom, WhatsApp, emails. Obviously, we are very open with those type of level people who prepare first an email to make an appointment. But I have to say, I've been able to have meetings with presidents that I probably wouldn't have had the time of the possibility before COVID. So I would say, if you are in that situation, not to give up, and not because it's going to be by Zoom, don't do it. I think that you need to continue building that relationship even using Zoom.
Well, we are unfortunately coming to the end of our time, so I have just one more question for you both. If there was just one thing, only one thing, but I'll allow you to add more if you feel so strongly, that you would like to tell fundraisers about fundraising in Latin America or North America, what would it be?
From the cultural perspective is that you need really to be open-minded and to be willing to learn as much as you can through different ways, reading and interacting with your students or alumni, so that you really can get immersed into the culture and be in a better position to develop good relationships.
If you want to do more than pop in every now and again with a super rich person and try to extract resources, which maybe is what your initiative is, and that's okay. But if you want to do something other than that, if you want to build something that's sustainable, that your institution can be proud of, that will reap dividends for generations, then think about spending the first 3 to 5 years really developing connections through your alumni association. So it's not just the fundraiser showing up year after year or season after season, because before too long, you will find that you have eroded your institutional credibility, that you really care about the region, that you want to bring people along from the region, that you want to strengthen ties. That may be true for you, the fundraiser, but if it's not true for the institution, it won't be a sustainable effort. So really try to get your institution on board and let them recognize this is not a transactional activity with 1 or 2 very highly net worth people if you want to build something sustainable.
I agree completely. That brought me back to my old times with the British Council, where there were some institutions that they will only come to Mexico to recruit students, and institutions were mad and said, you only want my students. And those institutions that will come in for a long-term commitment and willing to collaborate and be seen like there is a commonality and interest in developing, those institutions at the end of the day, because I was there 17 years, I was able to see how they develop, and by itself, students wanted to go to that institution without really having to do that much effort. So they had a different approach, and that at the end of the day impacted them very good. So I agree completely with Ellen's views on that.
Thank you both. This has been a wonderful conversation and exceedingly insightful. and we look forward to joining the Q&A if anyone has any questions for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.